And we have Tim Hay, Chairman.
Ryan Burns, member, present.
Mo McCarthy, member.
Who's out in San Francisco at this point?
I'm sorry?
You're out in San Francisco at this point?
Yeah. In the background.
Yeah.
You know what I was doing? I was entering last week's ID until I decided I better check and make sure. I had the wrong one. You sent the right one. I had just written it down wrong.
All right, well, we have no minutes to approve for this meeting, so we will put that off till the next meeting. And the 400 Manley Street is asked to continue to the next meeting.
Yes. So Tim is frozen. So you were frozen.
Okay, June 16th meeting for Manley Street. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion to postpone till next meeting, which is in 2 weeks, I believe.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. All right, that's the only public hearing part we had. So we have 2 administrative items, John. You want to?
All right, so I put on the agenda for general discussion about the Scotland Street 40B. So I was wondering, since we didn't have a lot of opportunity during the public hearings to discuss it as a commission, and it is posted on the agenda, and any of the public who cared to listen into what we were discussing tonight could have, and it doesn't seem as if anyone has. So do any of you members have anything in particular that stood out about the project, or do you think that we kind of got it fairly well ironed out between the 53G and the questions that I had asked after the 53G review was complete? I had asked a whole bunch of questions myself, and we seem to have gotten those answers and that kind of thing. But is there anything else that any of you commission members feel that we need to include in it?
I didn't think so, John. The only delay is that the Driscoll people don't have it ready yet for the 53G.
Yeah, they have not given us a final plan yet, which we need to refer to in the order of conditions, but pretty much they had done up what you might call a draft final plan.
Yeah.
And so it shouldn't take them too long to get it done. And as soon as I'm ready to draft up the final order, or what will be the order of conditions, we will ask them to get that plan over to us so we can use the date that they show as their latest revision.
Okay. No, I mean, beyond what you asked, I didn't have any more.
Good.
I mean, the only concern I would bring up would be the access to that, the leaching field,
yeah,
which some of the neighbors did say signage or a gate or something. Just if it's a road and access, you know, kids and people are going to want to try to either drive or see what's out there. So just making sure that would be my only concern. So
we talked about potentially putting up a sign. So how about going back to, even though they took it off the drawing, a gate, and just have a gate with a sign that says no access, unauthorized access?
I mean, I think that would be a safer bet. I mean, I'm just afraid that you're asking for trouble if you're going to have some type of a road or a path out there.
Yeah.
I mean, we have no responsibility if kids go around that gate with, you know, motorbikes or anything. I mean, which they probably will.
Right. So if we,
Yeah.
if we have the gate and a sign, then if they're out there on their own.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, at least a dirt bike is smaller than a truck. I'd be more concerned with a truck tearing up the leaching field and causing damage.
Yeah.
With the weight on it, but.
All right, and one of the other things that it seemed to have been kind of glossed over is the fact that the back of the houses on Scotland Street, north of Maple Street, or if you're standing on Scotland Street and looking out at the development, it'd be everything to the left of Maple Street, the dirt road that goes in. A lot of those houses north of that area have a proposed dwelling unit that's no more than 20 feet off the back lot line. And the drainage swale that will carry the runoff from the roofs in the yards will be part of that 20 feet. So it'll be an easement. They can't do anything to fill it in and that kind of thing to deter the water from flowing through it. Do we need to provide some visual barrier between the property line and the edge of the swale? And if so, do we go with a fence, or do we require a fence on one side and not the other? Or is that any concern to you members?
Are you saying they might over time want to fill that up with something, or if that's their whole backyard is 20 feet, right?
Yes, and what I have seen in my own personal experience for developments that we proposed fitting things in with shoehorns because the developer demanded it. Parts of our stormwater system were sometimes very shallow, broad, very inconspicuous storm basins that were part of the lawn and maintained as lawn by just mowing it like you would with any lawnmower. But during a flooding event, it would fill up. And so we found that oftentimes the sandbox, a play set with the wood chips underneath it, would be constructed in the drainage easement and the drainage swale, and it would prevent the water from flowing. It's going to be an easement, and it's going to be in the order of conditions that, that can't happen. But when you have such a tight distance between the back of the house and the edge of the near edge of the drainage swale, and then the only other thing you have is the abutter's back property line. Either the abutter throws stuff over the fence or over their back lot line, or the user of the dwelling unit does the same thing in some fashion of blocking it, and then we have an issue. So that's really a concern on my end, is how do we prevent that? And obviously if something does happen, we're going to hear about it, not necessarily the commission, but the town's going to hear about it, and people are going to be squawking. So it's not like it'll go unnoticed. It's just that it seems like if we can come up with something, it would be probably good to do that now than later. So maybe signage. Maybe that's all we need is signage.
And it would say nothing can be put into this particular area?
Yeah, I think there's a particular development in town that we recently discussed where some signage went up, and yet there were some things done in the buffer zone, and so signage is good for people that understand them and who will follow them. But not necessarily, not all people understand what it really means.
So you'd have to have the fence along the property line would be one thing, but then the house itself, how do you get people to, come out of their backyard and just do what they want when they come out there?
So let's say we had Luke Estates.
Yeah.
We required the homeowners association, which this development will have a homeowners association, to enter into a drainage agreement, which we can maybe specify that they are going to be responsible for maintaining that and inspecting it on a periodic basis, and we can actually list the times that they need to inspect it and assure that it's operating properly. And that way, if they're responsible for getting us a report on a certain quarterly basis or semi-annual basis, they are going to probably end up policing themselves. So maybe after tossing out or discussing it for this short period of time, maybe I'm more inclined to go that route than signs or fences, because again, people tend to ignore stuff, or once it's over the fence, they don't see it anymore. And not seeing it means that it's not a problem.
I'm thinking if you put a fence in, you're going to keep them from being able to maintain that swale. And I think you're going to see stuff grow up in it and debris there. Where if they go and even signs, I wouldn't be opposed to having this area, like a sign that says this area protected or environmentally sensitive or something like that. Just even if they self-police it, I don't know whether they're going to really know where the boundary is. I mean, the signs might not be a bad idea.
So should we put a fence along the line between the abutters and the development, and then have signs along the fence saying that the swale between the fence and, well, I don't know how we're going to word it, but they basically say that this area needs to be maintained as a stormwater drain system, and leave it at that. But do we want to put it on the property line to stop encroachments that way, or?
How long would it be, John? How many houses? A lot?
There's probably at least 12 houses. It's a lot of fencing.
Yeah. But I understand how with no demarcation there, it would just go back and forth without any. So I think
both ways.
I think the fence is a good idea, and I think if you put it in the language in the condo docs would protect us. But I know from my own experience, and you do too, that sometimes people don't read the condo docs. But at least we'd be protected because it's in there.
Now, are you thinking like just chain link or something a little more aesthetically pleasing? Or
yeah, like a post and rail, or I think people would object to chain link, wouldn't they?
Yeah, that was my concern. Something a little more, be kind of an eyesore.
Because it's cheaper than post and rail, so
Right.
Yeah.
It's cheaper.
But you're also, whatever you install is going to have to be turtle sensitive.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, so there, yeah.
So there'll have to be an opening at the bottom, like so high, right?
Right.
But
so a post rail obviously has that space, but a stockade doesn't, or a chain link does not.
Right.
Unless you have that opening periodically. So do we want to go with just post and rail?
I would go with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of the expense, it's an expensive project anyway.
Yeah.
So a fence along the property line then with signage.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then having it incorporated in the drainage agreement between the Conservation Commission and the Homeowners Association.
That's about all we can do, I think, isn't it? I mean, probably people will go back there and do things, and we won't know about it till someone calls. hotels.
Right. But at least at that point, we'll have the authority to step in.
Yes, exactly. Okay, good idea.
All right, so that was one area. The other area that I'm concerned about is the airport. So we have someone who's has a license on a year-to-year basis, and they're basically tenants at will right now because of this project having some up in the air type. We're not knowing exactly where we're headed with this project, and so I mentioned to the developer whether he would be able to move the turtle nesting site from where it's located right now, basically in the staging area and parking lot area of the airport. Could he move it across Maple Street to the other side? It's still the same elevation, and he didn't like that. Because he feels that the airport might become a nuisance to the people living there in the development. And also, it could be an issue with the Natural Heritage MESA people if we tried to do both on the same parcel. So do you have any strong feelings about wanting the airport to remain there? It is a source of funding that we've been putting away whatever they've given us so far into a special account that will be used to do invasive species control management of that parcel of land so that we don't cost the taxpayers money. And it will take a while to build that fund up because it'll get used up fairly quickly when we start going in and trying to eradicate the invasive species, unless we can come up with different methods. But the point I'm making is that the developer doesn't seem to want the airport there. It is on what is now town-owned land, and we had that conveyed to the town with the knowledge that there was to be a turtle nesting site on the land. But at this point, we're still, I think, in the position where we could negotiate with the developer and decide on how we want to handle it. I just don't want to do it unilaterally on my own and not have your thoughts as to whether you'd want them or not to be out there. They being the airport club.
Well, I would think if National Heritage is okay with it and would be willing to let us do it, I'd like to see the airport stay. I will also say that the Ag Commission, we've been approached by a number of different farmers in town looking for open space where they can actually grow cover crops, hay and silage. They wouldn't be tilling the ground. They wouldn't be opening anything up. And they'd be willing to also help maintain and keep the invasives down if there's any area in that they could actually farm. So that's also another possible income source that we might be able to utilize out there. So
does it fall under our authority as to whether the club stays there or not? Is it?
Yeah. Yes. Yep.
Because it's conservation land, or
they were there before the land was conveyed and before this development was proposing to develop this land. And so when the Natural Heritage issued their permit, anything that was there as of that time can stay. We can't go and create another new airport somewhere else on the land, or things can change as long as we work through the process with Natural Heritage, which doesn't necessarily mean that we have to incur a lot of expenses. We just need to work with them to make sure that everything that they need to be done to protect the endangered species is being done, and that we're not harming them. And I did, as Tim mentioned, talk to MISA about Natural Heritage about doing some cutting of hay out there, having some hay grown and then cut. And they are in agreement with that, but they would have restrictions on when it can be done. And so the farmer would have to abide by those timeframes or not do it. But that would be up to the farmer. If they thought it was workable, they would do it. If they didn't feel it was workable, some other farmer might and would step in and do it. But that is definitely not off the table as something that can't be done. It's definitely something that can be done. And again, I think we have standing on having the airplane club there because it was there before the permit was issued. And the permit does say that anything that was there, like walking trails and that kind of thing, can remain there. You just can't create all a bunch of new ones,
right,
without their permission.
I can't. I mean, I don't think they're out there all that often, are they? Maybe on weekends or something like that. But you know, the homeowners, I suppose, are going to say, "Oh, that's going to be noisy. What if they crash into my house?" And I don't know how far away it is from the lot lines either.
It's quite a ways away. And it doesn't seem like it's been an issue with any of the neighborhood down there. Matter of fact, a lot of those neighbors love the airplane club members, and we also like it because they kind of keep an eye on the place and keep vandalism down.
Yeah, they've been very cooperative, no doubt about that.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I'd like to see them stay.
All right, so we got to work something about that into the order of conditions, and if the developer objects, then they can always appeal it.
Yep.
So, you know, if the commission feels strongly about this, I don't mind putting something in there, and we don't have to have anything even finalized by the next meeting, because technically we don't have to issue any order of conditions until after the emergency order expires, and then we have a certain number of days after that to still issue permits. So we're being cooperative by trying to approve these things and have public hearings, but we didn't even have to hold public hearings all through this whole COVID-19 quarantine moratorium, whatever we want to call it. So I will work up some orders of conditions, draft ones, and send it out so that everybody can look at it, and we can discuss it at the next meeting, unless there's something else that you want me to add. But those were the two areas that I was concerned about, is the swales, other than, you know, what we talked about at the public hearings, the protecting those swales, providing some visual barrier, and the airport.
Mm-hmm. And then looking ahead, I suppose if the abutters to the airport had a noise issue, they would have to deal with the airplane club, or maybe us, I guess, right?
Yeah, so we could referee that issue and say, you know, that if you're being a nuisance to people, then we just have to modify your hours of operation.
Sure. Okay.
So along with that, if you recall, I had a discussion with the developer at one of the public hearings about maintaining the right-of-way through from Scotland Street through the development to our backland. And the developer feels that it's a public way, as noted on a number of recorded documents. And it's also part of that road layout if I recall correctly, 7 feet of the Maple Street is privately owned because the original was only 33 feet wide and they're making it 40. So they're taking the other 7 feet off of the land that's on the right side of Maple Street as you're going in, because the property line for the first lot started 7 feet that much south of the old Maple Street layout.
Mhm.
They're going to convey that to the town so that theoretically that's going to be public. And again, I see no harm in creating a document, even if we already own it. If somebody is acknowledging it by giving it to you again, then what's the harm? So I would like to incorporate it in, and maybe rather than taking and creating an expense by asking town council for their opinion, why don't we just do it? So I guess the point is that if I already own the land and my neighbor is willing to sell me any interest that he or she may have in that land that I already own, and they convey that interest to you, then that kind of buttons it right up. So there's no legal cloud or any question about ownership. And I'm afraid ancient ways, whether planning board members acknowledge that that part of Maple Street is public or not, I think trying to button it up with a document that would assure us of having it as a public way, at least to a certain point. And that point should be at least to the back of this development, so that somewhere down the line, the homeowners association and the trustees of that association of the Scotland Street 40B can't say, oh, you really don't own that and you can't go down there anymore.
Right.
And again, I know I had somewhat of a discussion with the developer early on in the first maybe public hearing. But again, I use the example of the fact that the area between the edge of my house and my neighbor's house, I own 30 feet away from my house, and they may know where they own their land. But if I had some doubts about the property line, I could have that neighbor sell me any interest in that not disputed but questionable strip of land and record it at the registry, and that would acknowledge forever that the owners of my neighboring parcel always will acquiesce to the fact that I own that 30-foot strip of land.
We have access, yeah.
And it causes no harm in terms of, other than you have to record a document, as long as everybody's in agreement. So at this point, as part of the approval of this project, I would think the developer would be in agreement to sign something, even if it was superfluous and unnecessary in their mind.
Yeah.
So I'd like to push for that as well.
That's a good idea.
All right.
I agree.
And that's all I have for thoughts on this, to craft some wording for the next, on the 16th. I'll have it all drafted out and we can have it sent out to everyone ahead of time, all of you members ahead of time, so you can give me some comments individually if you think they want to change some of the wording or add some. Does that sound pretty good?
Yep. Sounds
All right.
good.
They still have to go to the zoning board of appeals, right?
They have to go back to them to show anything that was modified through our process and get the approval and blessing of the ZBA that it didn't substantially derogate from their original approval.
I'm sure they're anxious to get going.
Yes.
And so the next one, John, you need a motion to appoint the Conservation Commission as the grantee.
All right, so the developer, I'm going to share with you a document that was sent to me. So this pretty much shows the development, and I'll take my cursor and I'll show you the development line. So it's all of this area that's got the green cross hatching and the white area that you can see the shaded out lotting and street system.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the development with its access of Maple Street here and the other access point down here.
Okay.
So what they're asking is that this is our land out here with conservation restriction already, that we're basically trustees of that. Actually, we own that land, but with restrictions on it, conservation restrictions. And what the developer is asking us is to take the unused portion of his development, which is this green crosshatched area, and for us to become trustees of that area so that it's protected from any future development. And without having somebody be a trustee of it, they could either, they could either have the Conservation Commission or something like the trust for, can't remember the name, the typical land trusts that you see all over the county, trusts for public lands, or help me out here with the name, Tim, of some of those land trusts that acquire land and protect it.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, I know some of the others that do a lot of forested land, but
you have the idea that there are public trusts, kind of like the Natural Resource Trust of Bridgewater is considered to be an organization that if they own a piece of property, it will be protected from development from that point forward. So what the developer is saying is that they can assure the MESA people that this will never be developed because it's going to be put into trust by the conservation, or to the Conservation Commission. And if it weren't, not necessarily to the commission, but if it weren't put into some type of public trust, theoretically, the owners of the development, the homeowners association, could decide that if they could get a permit from the town, they could put a soccer field in this area here. Well, it's wetlands, but this area up here, for example, is not wet, and they could put a playground up there. And Natural Heritage doesn't want to see that land put into any type of development other than natural. And so by assuring that it's been protected by ownership of the commission, not ownership, trusteeship of the commission, they will get assured that it won't be a playground or a small little ball field for the kids to play in and that kind of thing. So that's what the intent was, is that the developer is looking to either give it to the trusteeship to us or to the public land trust somewhere else around the county or the southeastern Massachusetts, like the Audubon Society or something like that. Anything that would keep it natural and undeveloped. So I thought it was at least something worthwhile discussing, since we already own the land adjacent to it.
Okay, the only thing I will ask, how does this affect the tax status of the property? Because I know sometimes in the past, the Board of Assessors have questioned taking stuff off of the tax roll and taking it out. Is this a tax benefit, or is it a kind of like a wash because it's already non-developable land as part of the association?
So there are some upland areas that are the darker gray area that you see along that crosshatch. So those would not be taxed as wetlands, but the rest of it would be taxed as wetlands. That doesn't mean that it's cheap. And I guess I don't have an answer for you, Tim, and I'll be more than happy to try to get that answer by talking to the assessor's office, and maybe also talking to Natural Heritage and the developer as to do we own it and it's no longer part of the development, or are we just trustees of it?
Okay. So I mean, I'm just thinking that if he wants to push back on the airplane thing, and we're taking this land all out of something that's a benefit for the association and the developer.
He already owns that land, right? All of it?
Yes. Yeah.
Now, if
there's got to be some giving.
I mean, is there anything he could put in the deed that would say something like this will never be developed in perpetuity or something like that? Or
I don't think that's probably good enough for Natural Heritage, but I can check into that, Mo.
I mean, it's just a thought, but either way, yeah, I see what you're driving at. I mean, we don't have a trust for the land that we own back here, right?
No, we own all that already.
But if he conveys this to us down here, why does it have to be in kind of a trust thing?
So,
oh, I see. You might go for a permit or something like that. Yeah.
So it's my understanding, and I may not understand it correctly, and I need to get some clarification on it as well. The development has to own this whole area here.
All right.
And also to appease the Natural Heritage for the protection of the endangered species, they have to have some, Natural Heritage has to have some assurance that this will not be developed in any way by either mistake. For example, a bunch of the neighborhood kids getting together and going out and creating a ball field, so because they have no room on their small lots to do recreation. And so they go out and they create a ball field and they disturb the area where the endangered species are, and take away the ground cover and all kinds of things such as that. And by taking out of the trusteeship of the homeowners and putting it into the trusteeship of the Conservation Commission, we would then be able to have the power to stop anything from happening like that. That was my impression of what the developer was getting at. I need to get some further clarification on it, but I felt that if it was something that the commission didn't want to pursue, then we could tell him right away is go give it to somebody else. He's going to do that anyway, one way or another. It's either going to another land trust that does these types of things, or it'll be us. And I figured since we own the adjacent parcel, why not, if it benefits us, to have control over it.
Yeah, I agree.
No, I think that's a good idea.
All right, so I'll get some further clarification on that, and we can put this on the agenda for the next meeting as well.
All right.
All right. What else do we have? I'll stop sharing this.
All right. I think the only other things we had were some invoices.
Okay. I have the next month's invoice from Zoom for the Zoom meeting, and it's already been paid for. So I'd be asking for a reimbursement of $14.99 because the town doesn't pay taxes, and I can't seem to get Zoom to, at this point, which I can possibly work on later, but for 94 cents last month and this month, almost doesn't seem worth my effort to try to get them to take it. So I'm eat the 94 cents. I'm asking to be reimbursed for $14.99 for the month of June Zoom meetings that we'll have, which will be basically two, this one and 16th. Plus, it seems as if some other committees like to, since they know I have the account, like to ask if they can use me as their host. As long as you guys don't object, I do it. But I think we've gotten pretty good use out of thing between the bylaw committee and the open space committee, that kind of thing. So,
sure. So I'll make a motion that Tim sign this invoice.
Yes.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. So moved.
Hey, that's all I have, other than when I sent you the agenda, I showed you the number of public hearings we're going to have next month, and they're substantial. So we're going to be busy at the next meeting.
Has that parcel out near Route 24 already been delineated, John?
They have sent in the plans and the application.
Okay.
Are there any major changes to that delineation from the last one?
No, it's pretty much follows it. I still have to go out and analyze, what's there, because it could have changed, but looking at it, it looks pretty much the same.
All right, because I do know there's some more vegetation growing up, and I wasn't sure whether that mirrored what was on the original one or whether things have expanded or grown into what its natural state should have been. I mean, I know there's been a lot of soil disturbance and everything, so looking at the actual soils might not show where wetlands are as much as vegetation might start showing up. That was my only question.
Yep, we have to really check that out, because it's been undisturbed now for quite a while. So it tends to have the vegetation come back where it had been disturbed in the past. So that'll all be scrutinized, but that is the parcel that they're looking at.
Okay.
And I don't know if anybody else has heard, but definitely they're talking about town meeting being on the 29th. Is it a Monday? Is that the 29th? Let me see.
7th, I thought, but maybe it's Monday.
29th.
29th?
Yeah. So town meeting is supposedly going to be held at the gymnasium and the cafeteria with simulcast going on at the same time, and they'll be able, by using those facilities, be able to maintain the social distancing required. And so it's not going to be in the auditorium, where it would be harder to keep everybody 6 feet apart. They've done some layout of how this would work, and it seems as if the numbers are working to keep everybody separated. So it seems as if that's where they're moving to for the town meeting. So I just wanted to let you guys know about that.
Thank you.
So other than that, I have nothing else.
All right. I have nothing else. Anybody? If there's nothing, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
I will second it.
Moving second. All in favor of adjourn?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Thank you, everyone. Good seeing you.
Stay safe.
Thanks very much.
Okay.